Hey everybody, welcome to Frequency Freaks for March 2021. We have a really cool show for you today with a panel discussion that centers on chaos, randomness, and games for your patching. This discussion is led by Michael Brooker and features special guests James Ciglar and Michael Barber. Next month, he's going to follow that up with a one-on-one interview with James, and the premiere for that workshop will be April 10th, so make sure that you're standing by for that, or staying tuned, watching our channel, etc. Or you can just like and subscribe and ring the bell, and you'll get a notification when that video goes up. Leucrocuta has a new album out, and there are some cassettes available, and she sent us along this really cool video to make sure we know all about it. So let's take a look at that now. I love that video. I'm going to put a link up in the corner here, and so you can go and check out her work on Bandcamp, and there's also a link down below in the description. So make sure you go and check out her work and buy some music so that she gets the support she needs. This month we have a new segment premiering, and that segment is the Gear Chronicles. It's our news with a twist that we've been talking about, hosted by Heidi Chan. This month, Heidi is going to be talking about the new ADDAC Granular synth module and revealing how it has evolved, or the history behind granular synthesis and how it has evolved into what we enjoy today. And of course, we've got performances by all of you folks who have submitted performances. There's a lot of them today, and they're really, really good. The talent that has been shown in these videos continues to astound me, and I hope you are as impressed with it as I have been. So that's it for now. We're going to get on with the panel discussion, so I'm going to turn it over to Michael Brooker. Please stay safe, and I hope that we can see each other in person sometime soon.
We'll get started with our group panel for the March 2021 Frequency Freaks. This will be our 5-year anniversary according to the website, so that's exciting. And I think it's a great opportunity for us in a big milestone like that to bring a guest on that that needs little introduction, I think, to anybody that knows hardware synthesis. You know, it's a great honor to have him here with us, James Ciglar, and it's on the heels of the release of his Patch the Card game, Volume 1, that has really kind of helped modular synthesis, like myself, get out of creative blocks and reimagine the way that reimagine our relationship with specific patches and with our systems as a whole. So, you know, I think many of the faces that our viewers are going to see on the screen at the moment are regular ones and ones that we see often. But maybe for those that don't know you as well as maybe they should, James, what's your MO? What are you all about?
Well, thanks so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here. Even just getting to talk synthesis and stuff is always really fun for me. But I guess, yeah, my origins are with, you know, playing in punk and metal bands, and then kind of getting out of that and wanting to, you know, write music on my own. And at the time, most of the stuff other than Pro Tools was sort of synthesis oriented. So I started getting into synthesis. I think Reason was probably the big gateway drug. And that started getting closer towards hardware synths. Then I think the next bridge was the Nord modular. And then the next bridge was kind of carpal tunnel and like getting really bad issues like patching late at night with a mouse. And then a friend of mine had a Eurorack system very early, you know, like mixed analog systems or solutions and Doper. And he said, well, you should come over and check this out. And then I left trying to figure out how I'm going to put together the money to start buying all this stuff. And that was probably about 2006. I think I got my first module, found the Muff forum, and I was probably like one of maybe like 11 or 12 Eurorack people there. Like if anyone remembers Frack Rack, there was a good number of Frack Rack folks on there sharing a lot of good info, a lot of DIY stuff. And, you know, at the time, some new manufacturers were coming out, like Livewire and Plan B. I think it just shown up and started making modules. So, and they never had any manuals at the time. So I started making videos just to share that with people on the forum. And it was just like, I don't want to pay for hosting these videos. There's YouTube and Vimeo. I'll just put them on there. And that just sort of became the start of that. Started to balloon to where I started to get in touch with manufacturers. They got in touch with me and wanted to, you know, have me help them show off features and things like that. My day job at the time was at Universal Audio, so I was going to NAMM every year, and I got to meet most of the manufacturers. That's where I met Tony and the folks at Make Noise, and that started a whole, you know, like, I test things for a living. Do you need help with anything? And he said, I'm working on this weird sequencer, and it's all microcontroller based, and, you know, there's probably bugs, and that was Renee. And the sort of logical extension was, like, oh, I'll make some videos. And I think that's what most people recognize my name from, was those 3 Renee videos. Yeah, and then sort of just jump forward. Just I really love modular synthesis. It's just not only just the fact that you can structure signal paths and anything your imagination you know, can think up, but also that you can really customize it to be an instrument that's the most inspiring to you. And to me, that's always like the thing that's really kept me involved with it. That, and it's such a cool community. Like it really is this thing where everyone is trying to figure this instrument out together. You know, everyone's kind of got their own version of the instrument, and we're all sort of figuring out our favorite ways to use it individually. And it's such a unique thing, you know, like for the most part, you know, people teach other people the guitar, but it's not like people are still trying to figure out, you know, ways to play the guitar for the most part, or you know, things like that. So that always was this sort of very interesting aspect of it to me. Of course, it always makes it hard. We're always changing our instruments around, so it's hard to get, you know, really good at it if we're constantly changing it. Yeah, I feel like I off-tracked from my intro a little bit.
No worries. No
Okay.
worries. It's all related.
That's what these discussions are about.
Good. Okay.
Yeah, it's all related.
My sort of growth of the system started to slow down. I feel like I was maybe lucky in that I got a lot of stuff early, and I sort of found the modules that I like the most, and what about certain modules I really like, to where I was kind of like, I've got what I feel like is my happy place of modules. I mean, there's always new stuff that interests me and I pick up and play with, but I kind of have this core set that always feels comfortable, and I haven't felt the need to like really, you know, grow. And I mean, I think my most recent fascination actually is the 208. I picked up a 208R a while back, and it was one of these things where I started joking after the first night of playing with it that if I just bought one of these, or if I was able to afford one of those in the beginning, I probably wouldn't have got into Eurorack. It kind of is like this perfect configuration to me. You know, it's simple and it's streamlined, but it's kind of caught all the things that I really enjoy. So I couldn't resist trying out the new 208C, the MIDI implementation and stuff like that.
So what makes the 208R and the 208C?
Sorry, what about it?
Who makes it? I'm not familiar with that.
Sorry, Buchla. It's like the
okay, Buchla. Yeah.
The voice aspect of like the music easel. That was the 208 module. 208R is a clone of the 1974 208 that was designed by Roman, who now does Black Corp, but was you know, behind Sputnik, the Sputnik Eurorack modules. And you know, Buchla, the company, has gone through a couple iterations. The most recent one, I think, is now just called Buchla, or Buchla and Associates again. And the 208C is their most recent iteration of it.
Interesting. Now, a major reason I wanted to get you on the show, not just because the Patch the Card game came out recently and we are having this milestone with us at Frequency Freaks, but was to have a sort of a broader conversation about games, chance, and randomness in musical composition and performance. And so I got a few of our local heroes together to have that conversation with you. And maybe we'll just have a brief intro if the rest of the people on the panel, maybe starting with Paul, can just introduce yourselves briefly for anybody maybe viewing this from out of town that hasn't seen a Frequency Freaks workshop before. And yeah, we'll just kind of give our elevator pitches briefly about ourselves.
That's actually a really good idea, Mike. I never introduced myself in these things, so I probably should. I'm Paul Stillwell. I'm kind of the facilitator for Frequency Freaks, and you know, Michael and Scott and Heidi, they're helping me out with all creating content and stuff like that, so that we can keep bringing interesting workshops out for everybody and help keep the community here together. Probably one of the most interesting things that's been happening as a result of lockdown, which is unfortunate because we can't get together in person, but there's actually been a benefit to that, and we actually have a lot more contact out now with other synthesizer groups like Colorado Modular, Southern California Modular Society, and places like that. So there's some good stuff happening, and I'll keep it there.
Thanks.
My name is Scott Lepore. I've been a member of the Frequency Freaks Toronto community now for a couple of years. A long-time electronic music maker and percussionist. So really enjoy the exchange of ideas, a lot of inspiration, a lot of fascinating creative individuals, including the people here in this discussion today. Just a fantastic place to spend time. With an amazing, pastime of synthesis. So I think sometimes I think I'm a gearhead, and then I realize I'm actually more of an introvert people person, and it's because of the wonderful people in this community.
When you have a regular segment that you contribute to the formally on the workshops, and I think maybe for the time being we're gonna release them as separate videos on the YouTube channel, but maybe tell us a little bit about the segment that you do, just for a minute or two.
Yeah. So again, as to allude to what Paul had said about the sort of the changes that lockdown and COVID have sort of brought to our lives, I sort of realized that we have a fantastic opportunity to get to know each other a little bit better. So I started basically interviewing members of our local community. Just about their backgrounds and their general interests, their creative influences, that kind of thing. The idea really just being to help, again, in this time when we're separated, get to know each other a little bit better. Certainly at our monthly workshops, our in-person workshops, one of the wonderful aspects, in addition to seeing, talking to everybody about how they work with their equipment and whatnot, and all the tech, if you like, but a great aspect of it is just getting to know each other. And I guess that's something that's kind of denied to us during this period of isolation. So I kind of thought, well, let's have a brief, conversation, as if it was between the performances or the presentations or the panel discussions in our get-together things, and we just record those and air them. And so again, just a wonderful opportunity to get to know people around Toronto better. See so many people who do fantastic work, on YouTube and broadcast this stuff, and are, really well known around the world, like you, James, and Mike, Heidi as well. You're very famous. Paul, you're quite well known as well. So it's just an opportunity, I think, for kind of everybody to kind of get a little bit of airtime, to get their 15 minutes, if you like. But as much as anything, it gives us a chance to kind of chat with each other, or sort of be the equivalent of a virtual chat. So it's been a real pleasure and a real privilege to be able to talk with people.
Well, I think we should go in order, maybe in fame order. So the next, well, we're going up the chain in fame, so I guess I'm next, and then we'll talk Mike, and then Heidi, who's the most famous. So
Stop it.
I'm Michael. I've been part of the Frequency Freaks community since early 2017, and started out in acoustic music and jazz and classical music at U of T. I got a piece of paper from them in 2013, and that was cool. Ran a band for a while, and then started building a studio in my house initially to try and save money on recording my band, because of course it was a large group, but my initial thought was that I would just build a studio so we could record the smaller things, like little overdubs and things. But then it turned into a passion for music synthesis and how much of these parts can I automate, and one thing led to another, and here we are, you know. But it's a real pleasure to be at this point now where I feel like I can contribute actively to the community instead of just kind of, I don't want to say taking, but, you know, asking for opportunities. Now I can start to create them for other people. And I think soon enough, when I'm trying to encourage more younger people to submit performances and submit just ideas for segments and things on here. And, you know, we've got some younger folks now that are, and people from more diverse communities that are taking part in the Frequency Freaks community. And it's a real honor to be a part of that now. So that's been great. Now we have Mike Barber, who let's hear a little bit about, because he, in terms of performing elements of chance and randomness, he's a name in Toronto that I just think of right away. So take it away, Mike.
Hi, so I'm Mike Barber. I'm a experimental composer and performer based in Toronto. My background, you know, in terms of formal training has been in jazz music. But over, you know, the years, I've also been always had one foot in the electronic space, electronic realm, one way or another. But it's only within the past 2.5, 3 years now that I've actually ventured into specifically the Eurorack world, and have you know, been incorporating that. And actually, that's become now almost like not my sole focus, but that it's my primary instrument at this point. Has been shifted to the Eurorack synthesizer for creating experimental sounds and performances.
Very cool. Now let's hear a little bit from Heidi. She performs under the name Bachelard, and has appeared on Popular Podcasts before, as well as some other live streams, and is doing sort of a semi-regular segment for us coming up. So Heidi, what are you all about?
My name's Heidi, and like most of you, I started playing acoustic music. So I would say, you know, one half of my musical life has been immersed in acoustic music. I play in traditional Japanese folk ensembles, and, you know, did Japanese drumming for a number of years. At the same time, I've been involved in exploring electronic music and have been using modular synths for about 6 years. And currently, I work as a graduate assistant at Ryerson University in Toronto, and I am part of the Alan Strange textbook reprint project, which I know a number of folks in the community know about and are very interested in. So I'm happy to talk about a little bit about that. And I'm very happy to be here today to learn from all of you and talk about chance and random and games in modular synthesis.
Great. So yeah, now that we've heard from everybody and a little bit about what we do, there are a couple of things that I wanted to kind of address. So James and I are going to do a one-on-one interview for this workshop where we'll go deeper in depth on Patch the Card game itself. But maybe just James, if you wouldn't mind just telling people what is Patch the Card Game, and why did you create it?
Sure. Yeah. So Patch the Card Game, I was always like mixed when I was trying to come up with the name of like, do I call it a game? Because it definitely has game mechanics, and I wanted it to be fun. But it's primarily like just a deck of cards, and I wanted to make it so where anyone could use them or play them however they saw fit. Everyone uses a modular differently. Everyone has a different creative process. Everyone has different needs when it comes to inspiration or whatever. So the key was, how do I make something that's inspiring in a multitude of different ways? And it started all just for me. I've been playing with modular synths for, I'm trying to do the math in my head. It's at least 13, 14 years. So I've got some sort of, well, I guess backing up a tiny bit, every musician or even just, I guess, artist, has their own style that I think comes from choices. If I sat down in front of any synthesizer, within maybe 30 minutes or something, I'm going to start making music that kind of sounds like the music I make with almost any kind of synthesizer. And I think that all comes from either conscious or subconscious choices or preferences when it comes to tonality or just technical process, or just finding those sounds you like and you kind of know how to find them. And over time, that just becomes very comfortable, and it's like muscle memory, like mental muscle memory. And where the idea for me that I needed to expand my sort of tool set or my muscle memory was hanging out with other modular synthesis in the Bay Area, and we would bring our systems together to see, and we'd usually have a lot of fun like just patching around with other people's systems. So watching other people patch my system and do things with the modules that I'd never thought to do, like not even complex patching, just sort of like putting some controls in one end of the range and the other controls in another end of the guide. Like one was the angle on the DPO. For some reason, like my default is to kind of put it in the middle and then play with it from there, not stick it all the way to one side or the other and start there and put the fold all the way up. And it was just sort of like, oh, that's a tone I've never gotten before, and I just didn't do it for some reason. So it was, how do I make a tool for me to kind of put me outside of my normal comfort zone and start with something out of left field and then hopefully learn something. So the idea of like flashcards, or it really started as just like this list of stuff that I'd like randomly decide, oh, FM drum patch, or one of the early ones was the Krell patch, if anyone's familiar with the Krell patch. It was just these things as like a starting point. So I'm going to sit down. I'm not necessarily working on music. I just want to play or practice really the modular synth, and I just need some direction, a starting off point. And as I started to put it together, I was like, I'm sure I'm not the only person with this problem. This could be really cool for anybody. And then once I kind of committed to that idea of like, oh, I could do this. I could make this. It changed the dynamic a little bit, but the goal was still there, was to kind of make this tool for practicing, learning, and expanding sort of an understanding of the modular synth as an instrument, but make it fun, and make it playable over and over again. That was a key goal. And that's something that games are really good at. You play Monopoly, it's not the same game you play, every time. And I played Magic the Gathering a lot when I was younger. And one of the things I really loved about that was, you'd put together a deck of cards, and depending on who you played or the order the cards came out, that game was always different. And I always really liked cards that weren't always the same every time you played them. Like they were useful in kind of these several different situations. So that aspect of like designing something that is going to be different every time you play it, but also simple and straightforward, and not necessarily like as an obvious comparison to like oblique strategies. It's a creative tool that's printed on cards.
That's by Brian Eno.
Yes, and someone else who I sadly always forget their name, but they did it together. Okay. But I mean, one of the really cool aspects of those cards is it's open to a wide interpretation. Like many of the cards are kind of non-specific, oblique, I guess. and open to our artistic interpretation. And I wanted to have that, but I also wanted it to be specific. Do a thing. Do this thing. Take an input and patch it to an output, or select a module and unpatch all of its things. But word it in such a way that every time you play it, it may not be the same module. It may not be the same connections. So even if you have 25 cards, which is what the Volume 1 is made up of, every time you play one particular card, it's going to feel and have different results each time. So that was sort of a key goal of designing it.
I gotta say, this one is one of my favorites.
Yes.
What's that one say, Paul?
It says, use only half of your modules chosen at random.
Yeah.
Another good one, or a sort of a key part of this, was making it so any kind of system, like the cards had an interesting result. So in like a larger system, that one becomes an important one because it just sort of helps you rein in what you're going to focus on. In a smaller system, it also, similar thing, but it challenges you to learn the modules in that system more, because you don't have the possibility of like, oh, cool, some of the random choices had VCAs or had some of the utility that you typically need in a patch. Well, I only have 6 modules, so now I'm working with 3. It's kind of a 3-module challenge. So it forces you to learn what those things are capable of deeper. So
you very consciously avoided adding a card. Go out and buy some new modules.
It's funny. I don't know why that one never thought to me. And then I can't remember if it was in the Make Noise stream or someone mentioned that. And I was like, oh, that's genius. I don't know why I didn't think of that. But yes.
Disruption. That'd be a disruption card.
Yes,
for sure.
That's a disruption card. Yeah. Take out wallet, buy module.
Yeah, and the graphic would be a burning dollar bill. For sure. And I like how some of these cards make you interact with the system physically differently. Like there's this abstraction card here that hopefully will come up on screen properly, but it's use no modulation, only your hands. And so what that makes me think of is, hey, maybe I'm only bored of this patch because I haven't touched it recently. Maybe I've got this spaghetti of wires in front of me, and it's sounding boring because I'm trying to automate too much, right? And so cards like that will just completely fix that in me. And there's actually a really cool piece of other hardware now that's out called the Landscape All Flesh, that, if you guys have heard of it, are really cool because it plugs into the 3.5 millimeter jacks, and it allows you to make the connections that would have been made with a cable, but with your fingers. So your body's, I guess, something about the charge carrying capabilities of the human body, or any living thing, really. I wonder if you put like 2 paws of a cat or something on these all flesh, and if it would work the same way. But that card just makes me think of the Landscape All Flesh.
Yeah, those looks like some of us have a set. Yeah, I have a set too. They're just in a drawer behind me.
That's wicked.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of those.
I'm not very conductive.
Oh, you're not?
No.
Except in a group context, in which case you're a great conductor.
Yeah. I was going to say you're very authoritative.
I have a quick question for you, James.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
the kind of the high level structure, the meta structure, with the different categories of cards, how did you come up with that idea?
So that kind of came naturally out of the design. It was I've never designed a game before. Honestly, I never really designed anything to this level. Obviously been fascinated with design, particularly game design, for a while, just because I love games and the mechanics of games. But initially, the idea was, so the abstraction cards, like you guys have shown, they're all kind of like, this is use every cable you can. It's kind of like a rule for your whole patch, or like a framework to kind of put you in a goal-oriented thing, or just sort of like a structure. And the idea is that this would stay out, or multiple of them would stay out while you're doing your session with the game. And initially, that's kind of all they were. There wasn't different card types. It was just different abstractions, and the idea that you could combine abstractions. But I noticed it wasn't quite as dynamic. And it was like, once you've, played the same abstraction 5 or 6 times, you started to kind of go to, oh, I remember 2 times ago I did something really cool, and you do it again. So I was like, that's kind of what I was fighting to avoid, was this idea of going back to the muscle memory, I hate calling them ruts because they're not necessarily bad. It's just, I think on the PodMod podcast, I refer to it like a path through the forest. You know your paths, and you just go back to the comfortable path. So I was like, all right, well, I need this aspect of cards that will get me to choose something that I wouldn't think to choose. It was sort of like the abstraction ones, or at the time it was just those cards where all right, let me sit down to do something I may not have thought to sit down to do. But now how do I make something that will get me to make a choice, a very specific action that I wouldn't think to do? So, and those felt like really different cards, and you'd use them in a different context. So I was like, oh, they're just 2 card types. Again, going back to, Magic the Gathering, there's concepts of permanence that stay out and kind of have an effect all the time. And there's also the concept of, just these sort of one-shot cards. They do something, and then they're out of the game, or they're just in a discard pile. So I kind of borrowed that kind of concept. And then as I was making more of them, I was kind of like, oh, I see kind of 2 trends here. I'm making ones that are like kind of disruptive to what you're doing. That's where that name came from. And then there are some that are kind of just small evolutions, or not drastic changes in theory, but they might have drastic changes. They usually weren't interacting with like patching or unpatching something. And it started to feel like there's subtractive and additive was kind of the thing. And since I already felt like
macro,
yeah, exactly. So since I already kind of had this feeling of like, well, those are disruptions, the opposite felt like, sort of progression. And then to some degree that then further informed how I developed more cards. It was kind of like, okay, now I have this concept of these 2 different types of, progression and disruptions. So now let me think more about, well, what other actions could be something that's like the progression flavor? What are some other ones that could be in the... So it was really interesting as I designed it, and it was sort of like the need for something would come up with an idea, and then that idea would then inform, more ideas, or create a structure for developing more ideas. So it was a really interesting process, this kind of like iterative design, and every time I kind of come up with a new idea, once that idea felt good, it spawned a structure to, create sort of more ideas around
to sort of encompass it like a bucket. And with the next sets, do you imagine do you conceive that you'll be adding, again, sort of more buckets, more high-level constructs?
Yeah, so I don't know if anyone's noticed, there's 4 colors in the corners. There's blue, green, and red, which are currently the abstraction, progression, and disruptions, and then there's a purple. So the volume 2, which is coming close to, at least design-wise, done, will add a 4th card type, which I kind of want it to be a little bit of a surprise, but it adds a little bit more to the game aspect and tries to make the play a little more dynamic. So if someone wants to really fully have the cards driving their experience, it kind of adds, again, a big thing for me is replayability. I don't want someone to buy this, have a great time with it for a week, and then go like, yeah, I'm not learning anything anymore. Mm-hmm. For me, like, I still learn things playing it, and I'm probably 80 plus, maybe 100 plus hours of play testing. Like, I really play tested it a really long time. So that's always like the ultimate goal is like, this should be as useful a tool as the modular for that kind of length of time. So what this 4th card type will do is just kind of, again, make each session feel that much more different.
Well, and of course, it increases the range of options, exponentially, right? So, and yeah. Just a quick question. Sorry, Mike. A quick question for you. How many sets do you currently conceive of, and is there a bound to that?
I guess there's no real bound. I kind of always conceived of 4. There's just for like between the card types, the colors, it just sort of felt right. And I also didn't want to get to the point where I just started making cards just to make more volumes. Like, I wanted each card to really be a significant good card, and it was really interesting. Some ideas I thought would be great, and then I'd play test them and like, this is terrible. It either is like super duper disruptive, or there's kind of only a couple options that you could conceivably think to do. So it really doesn't end up giving you a lot of variety. It's just kind of like, oh yeah, so there's 3 things I can do when this one shows up. So I didn't want to get to this level of like, oh, we just need to print more cards because it's time to make, volume 8 or something. So 4 felt good. I feel like with volume 2 completes the kind of idea, adding the 4th card type and everything. So I'm kind of designing volume 2 to where if there was no more volumes after that, I felt like it was complete. So that's kind of my goal for volume 2. And then volume 3 and 4 will be kind of more truer expansion packs where it's just more of those cards. And if we don't get to volume 4, I'm okay with it. But it would be nice to use those 4 colors on, shoot, I don't have a box in reach, but the side of box 1 is blue. The side of volume 2 will be purple. And then if there's a 3 and 4, they'd be red and green. So that kind of bundled it all up.
One thing that the game does that I think is really necessary in using your modular is it imposes constraints, right? And so because with a modular synth, the best thing about it can also be the worst thing about it, where you have a ton of options and you have a lot of choice. And these are instruments, but I really think of them as like environments that give rise to instruments. I usually think of the patch itself as the instrument that you've made for the day. And, most of us will work with a patch between, 10 minutes and 10 days at most. There are some people that will deal in longer spans of time with a single patch, like Suzanne Ciani on the extreme end, where she says she's used the same patch for 30 years or something. But I think of that as the instrument, but this idea of imposing creative constraints and that being a necessary thing, we usually think of constraints as a negative, like especially in Western society, where in like Western capitalist society, I think, where it's very much about individualism and I have no limits and I can do whatever I want whenever I want. Well, that can also be terrifying because, I think if comparing it to like careers and things where now nobody knows what they want to do with their life because they have all of these choices about things that they can do, right? Whereas 200 years ago, you did what your dad did. You did what his dad did, right? And that was difficult in its own way, but a lot simpler for sure, because you knew you'd be a tailor, right? But I wanted to bring Mike Barber back into the conversation here because he has some interesting ways that he imposes constraints on himself during performance and during composition, and they relate to this theme of chance and randomness. So, Mike, maybe tell us a little bit about how you incorporate that, and what tools do you use to kind of limit yourself in a positive way?
Yeah. So what I tend to use most of the time, and for introducing chance, is as was originally mentioned, like dice. I'll hold them up here since it's kind of easy. So like you see, they're multi-sided die, right?
Yeah.
They're the kind that are mostly associated with Dungeons and Dragons, which is exactly where they came from and why I had them to begin with. Like it goes back to like, so I don't really use chance in terms of imposing restrictions necessarily on myself, right? For me, it's actually a slightly different approach, right? So look, when it comes to introducing chance or stuff like that, right? There's like the oblique strategies or some of the stuff I'm familiar with the patch cards. It's like it's kind of an intervention kind of methodology, right? It's about intervening on your method a little bit. Like maybe you have writer's block, or maybe you want to force yourself out of your comfort zone, or a number of different ways. right? That's like what, Eno was using the oblique strategies with U2, for example, when they were recording, I think it was Joshua Tree, where he was trying to get them out of their their
Their hangups.
box of comfort. Yeah. But for me, it's like I actually come more from like the John Cage school of thought in terms of that. Like for me, it's about indeterminacy and chance operation in that respect. So
those are big words. What do those mean?
Basically, it's just fancy ways of saying the same thing. It's indeterminacy. It's kind of like improvisation, more or less, right? So like John Cage, one of the things that he used was the Dali Ching, right? It's like he would use, the Bagua and stuff like that in different ways and he had his own system basically where you took that and like kind of encoded some sort of, I guess you could say, algorithm to it in a way, right? So like, and maybe I should explain a little bit about that. It goes back to I don't know. I should probably not veer too deep into that because that's an easy way to get off track. But like there's different ways of implementing it, right? Sorry.
So Mike, when you're performing, like I think the first time I saw you perform, and it was a pretty dark room, and like it was in a basement, and if you turned the lights out, it would have been pitch black. Yeah. Like can't see your hand in front of your face, kind of black, and I saw you doing something behind your modular, and you were shaking something up, and then you were looking intently, and you were kind of like, and you would do it again, and then you would change something. So, what for you determines the right time to bring the die into place, or into play, I should say? Like, what makes you decide now is the right time to roll the dice to get something different happening?
That's random. It's kind of it's a rather impulsive thing in a way. Like for me, like one of the reasons why I use this so much, and this was like a method I was using actually that predates me getting into modular, is using this in different ways in other things when I was using other tools to perform live. Like it used to be like just me with a bunch of guitar pedals feedbacking into each other, and I would just just start twiddling knobs and stuff like that, right? Old school noise kind of stuff. But it's like I have Tourette's, so like having like impulsive random physical twitches and tics like that is just a natural part of my life. So this is like a way of me kind of like bringing that part of me into my music, into my art. So having like a tic is just, it's an impulsive thing. It just comes. So it kind of like more or less I have this like built-in random clock in a sense that I just decide, okay, let's roll these dice, and I'll decide, for example, there's an 8-sided die, which is sometimes good, for example, if I want to change something in a sequencer, like if it has 8 steps, I'll roll the die, and like the number 1 came up. So that means I'll change something on the first stage. I'll roll again, and it'll be the 4th stage that I'll change. If I want to change a knob, sometimes a really good one is the 12-sided die, because it's like a clock. So I roll that, and usually, if the 2 comes up, then I'll turn something to the 2 o'clock position. If I roll a 6, well, we can't go to that. So that's, for me, it just means a 6 means roll again. So there's different things like that comes up, and when I do it it's just kind of random. I just decide it feels right, because again, it's like randomness is great for as having it's almost like a second performer playing with you in a way, right? Because as a jazz musician, when you're performing live and doing improvisation, you have at least usually one or several other people playing with you, right? So I usually played in a trio configuration, and so we always had each other to constantly push and pull ourselves in different directions. This is a kind of like a way of introducing that push and pull. But at the same time, you're an artist and you still need to make decisions for yourself. And so that's where, that kind of organic feeling comes in, is I just decide now's the time to introduce some chaos into it again.
And Mike, do you have sort of a familiar approach to it where you look at a module or a parameter or something and then say, I want to roll the dice on that? Or do you just simply have an inspiration to roll the dice and then choose what you're going to apply it to?
Oh yeah, I'll choose basically first what it is I'm going to change. Like sometimes it'll be the specific module or it'll be the family, right? So it's like I'll decide, okay, I'm going to change a voice versus change an LFO, or I'll choose a specific module like the loqualia guitar test, and it'll be like, okay, let's decide to change the morph, and I'll roll the die. Or if there's 4 different parameters that are more likely to adjust, that isn't the pitch, right? You got the morph, fold, modulate, and damp. So that's four knobs. So I got a 4-sided die. I can roll that, and whatever number I decide to assign the 1 to, that's the one I'll change, and then I'll roll another die with it that'll decide what value I'll turn it to.
And is there some kind of, have you sort of evolved, if you like, speaking of James's point, sort of a muscle memory where the 8-sided die is usually, you look at a module and say, okay, this has got a certain range of parameters, I'll grab the 8-sided die? Or, in other words, is there a die per module or a die per parameter or family of parameters?
Yeah, pretty much. Like it'll when it comes to, for example, knobs, anything, with a rotary knob, generally I'll grab the 12-sided die just because I associate, the knob with a clock. And I think of the values as the position of a clock. So to me, that's the intuitive way that I would approach it. Somebody else may look at it and be like, well, I think of, like 0 to 10 or 1 to 10, and they'll choose the 10-sided die and use that. So when it comes to knobs, generally, yeah, I go for the 12-sided die because I think of a clock. When it comes to sequencers, it's, the stages. Like Metropolis has got 8 stages, so I'll grab the 8-sided die. For something that's got, like 16, then I'll grab 2 8s and I'll roll those. Or I'll roll the 20-sided die, and anything that's over 16, it means roll again, for example, right? So generally that, or, like the pressure points has 4 stages. So again, for that, I can roll the 4. And with the 3 knobs, I can roll like multiple dice at once. And it'll be like, okay, well, for the 4th stage, I got a 10 and a 4. So I'll turn that to 10, that to 4, and go from there.
That's what I was just wondering, actually, was like, do you roll multiple? Do you roll in sequence? This is fascinating because, and this is just so apropos that I feel like I should just leak a couple of the Volume 2 cards are dice-based. And especially you mentioned the sequencer. So I had a card for a while that was just use no more than 5 steps was an abstraction. And a lot of that influence was from the Buchla 208 has just 5 steps, and you can switch between 3, 4, or 5, and that's your only choices. But last night I kept debating, well, that's good. That's better than, choose your number of steps. But it's like, what if I had another card with a dice roll, and you roll the dice, and that's the number of steps for your sequence? So not exactly what you said, but it was so close that like it was just this very weird, because I was just thinking about that last night. I really love the idea that you're sort of choosing a module and then rolling to pick a control. That's super cool. I had never sort of thought of that when I was trying to come up with ways that the dice would integrate. Because in Volume 1, choosing with I use the word choose in a general sense. It's kind of like up to the player to choose how they want. They could just straight up choose. I usually use like a kind of just spin a cable and drop it, and what the cable touches is the choice. I made some jokes about flinging the cards at the case, and whatever the card hits, that's your choice. But a really fun one ended up being dice. You kind of just number the modules in your system, roll however many dice you need to, and then that's the module you chose. It never dawned on me to like take that one step further. There is a card that is roll for a number of connections and then patch that many at random. But that's awesome. I'm really fascinated by the way you're and integrating it that much into your performance, the way you're using dice. That's really cool.
Yeah. Well, to answer the question about in terms like sometimes it's a roll one and then that'll inform what I roll
What?
again.
Gotcha. Okay.
And sometimes I'll roll them together. So again, and that is just a habit that came out of when I used to play Dungeons and Dragons,
Sure.
like 80 years ago. That's when the 80s were, right?
That's what the 80s means. Yeah, it was 8
Yeah,
years ago.
that's right. But yeah, no, because like I got into Dungeons and Dragons when I was, 9, 10 years old. And so I've had these dice since then. That's
That's
why I
awesome.
had them to begin with. So when it came to, when I was like learning about John Cage and stuff like that in high school through my music teacher, who introduced me to it, because he was like, Mike, you're a weird guy. You would really, really like this guy. Um, and he was right. And it was great.
I am a weird guy.
No, I mean, I know who I am.
We're all
And
weird. If you're on this
yeah,
podcast, you're weird.
exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I had these Dungeons and Dragons dice from back then. So when it came to, developing my own thing, it made sense for me to gravitate towards these because they were what was already there. They were already part of my life. I already had this kind of thing built in. So it's like so there's a bit of game theory, I guess, in that to a sense. Because in Dungeons and
Hmm.
Dragons, sometimes you roll a single die, sometimes you roll multiple, right? Depending on you know uh, on the purpose of the roll. So sometimes I'll come up with different strategies for how I want to implement them. So sometimes if I want to kind of start off with setting up some parameters ahead of time, sometimes I'll make a matrix. Just grab a piece of paper, make a 2 by 2, 4 by 4, 3 by 3, whatever, grid of different things. And so like usually, if it's 4 or 6, because I'll generally keep it that big because I have a 4 and a 6-sided die. And I'll roll, which column number do I choose, and then which row number. So I got a 2 and a 2 there. So it's whatever is 2 over, 2 down. That become, that's the thing, right? So whether I've said, made like, okay, here's my 3 voice modules, and here's the 3, different like
Ah,
modulation things. Which
right.
one am I going to attach to which? And I'll just roll that, and I'll be like, okay, so I'm going to use Batumi to control plates, and I'm going to use Zadar to control, clouds.
That's
It will
awesome.
come out of that as a way of setting things up. But sometimes I'll also reject the things. It's like I don't, to me, these are not like rules
Yeah, they're like
necessarily. Because
guidelines.
yeah, it's a thing to like kind of, give me an idea a little bit. But sometimes there's been rare times where I've rolled that and I looked at it, I'm just like, no, that's a rubbish idea. I don't like that at all. I'd rather go it this way.
Yeah, I
Um,
had a feeling that Mike, that you and James would really be kindred spirits on this thing, and I feel like it's the start of a beautiful friendship.
Yeah, absolutely.
You guys should probably work together on volume 2.
Yes. Yeah. As
Yeah.
soon as I have something, I mean, I can give you all the first prototypes were ones I just drew on blank cards in my house with my hand and just sent to a couple people. So, yeah.
I wanted to thank everybody for being a part of this, and I wanted to, just as a brief epilogue and as kind of a I don't want to say like preview for a future session when she's ready. But there was one thing that you mentioned, James, on the December 17th, 2020 office hours when you went on with Walker Farrell and you were talking about Patch the Card Game. You mentioned in that session that, somebody should really take a look at the Alan Strange book and the Alan Strange textbook, and because it's been out of print for so long and it costs like $1 million if you want to buy a copy now, and they're all used and hard to find. So yeah, somebody should really reprint that. And then Walker said, yeah, I think there actually is a professor that's doing that. And so Heidi actually works with said professor on that project at the right now. And so, yeah, I'd love to hear from you, Heidi, and James, if you have any questions or anything, personal experiences with the Alan Strange book that you want to talk to Heidi about, now would be a great time.
Sure.
Sure.
I'm so excited that that's happening. I mean, I was able to finally procure myself a second edition that I treat very, very gingerly. So the fact that you guys are doing, my understanding is a hardbound, a spiral bound. It's kind of like a table, like your sort of workbench copy, and regular paperback, I think is amazing. Like, it's such a great book. And I think subconsciously, like maybe, when I was thinking of this game, it was coming from how I would go back to that book for ideas. It's just, I mean, aside from a great, really wide introduction to synthesis, particularly modular, but it kind of applies to anything. There's just some really great ideas in there that are not ideas that even if someone, had been using Reason or soft synths for a long time, would think to try. It's just, I was just reading it again the other night, and it was just sort of, there was, I forget what page it's on, what the figure is, but it was a drone, and the drones are my thing. So I was just really surprised, like I hadn't done this, where it was 3, and I also put my oscillators in intervals like this, but it was, like I think half, quarter, tuned intervals for 3 oscillators, and then you had 3 corresponding modulators to filters. But then the modulators had an inverse relationship. So on the highest tuned oscillator, you had the slowest rate modulator, and vice versa. And it was just, I've never done that. And there it had been sitting for however many years I've been reading that text.
Sorry, I called it the Alan Strange book, but Heidi, what's the actual proper name of the book? And, what is that book about for people that don't know?
So the book is by Alan Strange, and is a project initiated by Dr. Jason Nolan at Ryerson University. And basically, I hope I'm representing him correctly here. If he's watching, it basically sprang out of his desire to give back to the community, and he wanted a copy of it, and and he has the resources as someone working in the university to have the resources to reprint. So, and then I joined his research lab last year, and then got involved. But the book is called, if I remember correctly, Electronic Music Systems, something and Controls.
Do you have that handy?
I do. Just give me 1 second. I'll find it right now.
Yeah, you have it. Systems, Techniques, and Control.
Systems, Techniques, and Controls. And so I can talk a little bit about what my role has been in this book. And I felt really lucky to do this. Is we have to get permissions to reprint a lot of the diagrams and photos. And so what my role has been is to find folks who may have, better photos or original diagrams, and ask them to either contribute new photos or just ask for permission. And I've been able to connect with a number of really great people, including Dave Rosen himself, who has given us photos of his EMU modular. And we've been working with a couple of folks involved in the MEMS project who are actually trying to explore the Buchla system, and they're going to be helping us with updated photos of the Buchla modules. I've been able to reach out to just folks I found online. I'm like, hey, you have this amazing photo of this, really old, obscure piece of gear. Can I use it in our reprint? And as soon as they heard that it's for the Alan Strange textbook, they're like, totally, use anything on my website kind of thing. So I've been able to get to know and connect with a lot of people, and to get them aware of the project as well. And so as I'm working on this book, I'm also reading it myself, and I've been sort of working through some of the patches in there, and they are really educational. And it's always nice to, like you said, James, I find I love working on other people's systems, And I love having other people work on my system because, again, they make choices that you wouldn't, and they configure their modules in a way that you would never have thought of, combining certain things together. So that's the book, and it's moving forward, and yeah, we're gonna have hard copies as well as soft copies to cater to the widest range of readers and folks. And I know that I believe we have been in discussion with Walker to maybe help us with a little promo video when it's ready, and we're gonna have a Kickstarter campaign. So yeah, things are in motion right now, and very excited to be a part of it.
Yeah, I'm like I said, even that I have a copy of the second edition. I'm so excited to get these updated copies. I mean, there's not a lot in my house that I would run and grab if things were on fire, but honestly, that book would probably be one of them.
Yeah. And that spiral bound will be really valuable. I want one of those because I'm almost afraid to use my Alan Strange book. I have a PDF version that I got that I printed out on my own printer that I use for like working through the book. And yeah, and the one that I own, I just keep in the bookshelf because I just can't risk it. But yeah, I think, viewers of this channel will not be able to ignore it. We're going to make a huge deal out of it when that book comes out. And we're going to have a lot of videos and posts and things to do with it. And I'm really excited for that progress. It seems like it's moving quicker now. And what's the time horizon, do you think, for it?
I think sometime this year.
Awesome.
Yeah. And I'll say one more thing is that what I think those of us who like a little bit of history and like to read books from, 70 years ago or from the 60s and 70s. The other interesting thing about reading books from that era is you get a sense of the excitement of things that were developing at the time. And it also puts in context a lot of techniques and things we take for granted today. And that's also, I think one of the things I'm trying to get across in the segment that I'm doing is to like look at this new gear, but look at what led up to it. And so I think reading Alan Strange, also the way he writes was like, where is this all going to go and where things are at. And so I really love getting a sense of that as well, reading history books.
If only he could be here to see it.
Oh, I know.
Oh, okay. So I do need to mention that this project has been in collaboration with Alan Strange's widow, Pat Strange, because she's the person who owns the copyright to the book. So everything, all the sales, the profits will go directly to Pat Strange.
That's excellent.
From this project. Yes. Thanks for reminding me.
Well, I want to thank everybody for being a part of this in a big way. I'm going to do a one-on-one shortly with James to go more in depth on Patch the Card Game and some questions that I have to do with it. But, Paul, Scott, Heidi, Mike B, other Mike B, thanks so much. I really appreciate your time on this, and it's been a real honor to chat with you all. So thanks very much.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you guys so much for having me. It was really fun.
Thanks. It's been a real pleasure having you here, James. Very nice to meet you. Thanks.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. This is Heidi, and this is the first episode of the Frequency Freaks news segment, where I discuss upcoming modular and synth releases. And as we are checking out these new devices, I also want to look into some of the history and developments in music technology that led up to this new gear. So I hope you'll enjoy what this segment offers. I'll also share a list of links in the Frequency Freaks Discord space for those who want to further look up the information that's mentioned in this video. 2021 is turning out to be quite a promising year for granular processing modules. Of course, the main exciting news of the last few weeks has been the release of Mutable Instruments Beads, which is the long-anticipated update of the immensely popular Clouds module, and I'm sure by now most of you either have one or have watched a number of videos about it. Besides the beads, there are a few other new granular/sampling modules on the horizon that's worth mentioning. Expert Sleepers just announced a granular processing algorithm for the Distinct EX. Mordax's GXN granular processing module has been rumored for a while and is gaining a bit of momentum again. A new company called Miso Modular has been teasing a couple of new modules, one being a dual looper called the Bicycle, and the other one a granular sampler called the Cornflakes. There's also been a few recent updates of older sampler modules, like the new version of the Sample Slicer from Ginkgo Synths, and a new version of the G0 from Mungo Enterprises. Last but not least, Industrial Music Electronics has been teasing a granular processing module called Volkmeyer's Inferno, and there's finally a bit of an audio demo on the company's SoundCloud a couple of months ago, which sounds pretty intriguing. Today, what I chose to focus on is what I think is a really exciting upcoming release, which is the ADDAC Systems 112, a 2-panel, 45 HP device that they have named Voltage-Controlled Looper and Granular Sampling Machine. It's scheduled to ship at the end of March, but they have made a user guide available for those who want to get a sense of its main features, which we'll get into more detail shortly. For those who aren't familiar with granular synthesis, in very, very simple terms, it is a digital synthesis technique where pieces or grains, usually very, very small portions of a sound file, are being played back at the same time according to different programmable parameters such as grain size, volume envelope, pitch, and perhaps grain location, or the point at which the audio grain is being extracted from the captured audio file. Your audio source can be anything from a synthesizer tone, a radio stream, or a physical instrument such as a frame drum or a flute or a banjo. There are plenty of granular processing tools in both the software and hardware domain, and we won't go too deeply into the list of Eurorack modules right now, but if you're interested, I highly recommend Martin Duderoff's comparison list of Eurorack samplers and sample playback modules. Going back to the ADDAC 112, I was initially drawn to it because of its physical design. Now, I'm not normally attracted to huge modules because I don't have a large system, but I really like ADDAC's bold decision to make this a very hands-on tool, and that appeals to me. Now, one of the specs that a lot of folks have been talking about is the buffer size range on the 112. Usually, granular processors are meant to capture very, very small portions of incoming audio, but the 112 adds the possibility of long buffer sizes of up to 5 minutes. And to quote from the user guide, it allows softer approaches to the granular principle, using it as an effect that can generate from accidental effects like slight stutters to extreme processing and transformation of any incoming audio signal. In terms of its audio specs, the module records at 16-bit 44.1 kHz resolution, and files are saved onto an SD card. Up to 99 loops can be saved to a preset, and up to 99 presets can be saved to a bank. Now let's take a look at the main functional blocks of the 112. The module is divided into 3 main sections: the looper engine, the granular engine, and the mixing section. The looper engine is kind of the top-level control section for recording audio into the buffer and contains other looper functions, including a basic transport panel. It also includes switches for overdubbing and punching in, which to me is very promising because I do notice a few of the popular Eurorack samplers and loopers do not allow overdubbing. The next functional block is the Granular engine. ADDAC has thoughtfully designed the panels so that the arrangement of the control knobs appear in the same configuration on the I/O module. Within this section, we also see trimmers labeled deviation, which is the module's built-in randomizer. So each trimmer attenuates the amount or the spread of randomization for a particular parameter. The third functional block on the 112 is the mixing section. And on the I/O panel, we can find both Eurorack and line level inputs, an input gain knob, and both stereo and mono outputs. On the control panel, there is independent volume control for the dry signal, the loop, the grain engine, and there's a grains feedback level for controlling how much of the grains are fed back into the looper input. And taking a little closer look at the I/O panel, there is pretty much an input for every panel control, including the looper transport section, which means that recording and playback can all be automated using gates or trigger inputs. There are also loop and grain trigger outputs, which seems to indicate that a trigger is sent out at the beginning of each loop and perhaps at the firing of each grain. So you can potentially clock your whole system using audio material in the 112. Last but not least, we see a screen on the control module, and from the available information at this point, it seems that the screen is mainly used for accessing the menu of banks and presets that the loops are saved in. It also looks like there might be some visual representation of the grain location and what parts of the loops are being played back. As mentioned earlier, part of this video segment is to look back at some of the developments in music technology that led to something like the ADDAC 112. And this is definitely not meant to be a comprehensive history lesson, but I learned a lot from researching for this video, and hopefully some of the ideas and people mentioned here can spark interest for further reading and musical explorations. The term granular synthesis can be traced back to Curtis Rhodes, who first introduced the concept in a computer music journal article in 1988, and most notably in his 2001 book, Microsound. But Curtis Rhodes attributed his inspiration for granular synthesis from the famous composer Iannis Xenakis while he was a student at Indiana University and took a workshop with the composer. Although Xenakis first demonstrated the idea of granular synthesis as early as 1959 in his composition Analogique B by splicing and recombining tiny pieces of tape, he also pioneered the application of set theory and stochastic processes to composition, and viewing the computer as a tool with its own set of operations for sound that do not need to be tied to acoustic parameters or simply modeling existing sounds. Many of Xenakis' ideas were adopted by Curtis Rhodes, which evolved into granular synthesis as we know it today. In the book Microsound, Rhodes talks about the idea of seeing musical events along a system of timescales, from infinitely long sounds down to the microdomain of milliseconds, samples, and even subsamples. There is an interesting Canadian connection in the history of granular synthesis. It was composer Barry Troe who pioneered real-time granular synthesis with his program in his PodX computer music system in 1986. When we think about granular synthesis today, we don't really think twice about real-time processing, whether we're using a module or a plugin or a hardware synth, because microprocessor technologies today just allows us to do that. But back in the 80s, granular synthesis had to be done non-real time because it just took very long for computers to calculate in this micro domain of sound.
1000. DMX 1000 is a digital signal processor that was microprogrammable. And in those days, it wasn't possible to go into this level of micro domain of sound, microsound as it's sometimes called, except in non-real time with lots of detailed calculations, lengthy calculations, that is to say. So the DMX 1000 being programmable meant that I could implement this method of synthesis by going to smaller and smaller units called grains and produce hundreds and thousands of them per second, because there were no granular synthesizers that were out there. It had to be done in software.
Since the introduction of granular synthesis and the concept of microsound by Curtis Rhodes, there has been many further applications of the idea of working with sound particles. Today, granular synthesis can be seen as a branch of what's called particle synthesis, which deals with different ways of working with microsonic content. So you may have come across other terms in software and hardware, such as Glisson synthesis, trainlet synthesis, pulsar synthesis, and formant synthesis. In the Eurorack format, some of the early sampling granular modules include the very unique Doepfer A112 wavetable sampler, the Industrial Music Electric's Time Safari, and the Make Noise Phonogene. And a little bit later on, we have the Make Noise Morphogene and the Qubit Nebula. Of course, over the last few years, more and more modules with deeper sampling and granular features have allowed modular users to work with really complex audio material and ways of audio manipulation, like the orthogonal devices ER301, the ROSM Assimilator, the ALM Squit Sample, the Instro R-Bar, and the 1010 Music Bitbox. And I think the ADDAC 112 makes a really unique addition to what's already out there, and that it should be especially appealing to those, such as myself, who are interested in a more performative or instrumental approach to live audio processing and sampling.
This is weird.
You like.
Not that. Hey, 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 this is weird.
You like. The boy I saw today is different.
Not that.
Do you like pussy? What? Cats. Do you like pussycats? Jeez, you're a nasty little thing, aren't you? The boy I saw today is different. You like.
Not that. Hey,
The boy I saw today is different. You like. The boy I saw today is different.
hey, this is weird.
You like. The boy I saw today is different.
Not that. Hey,
The boy I saw today is different. You like. We got the whole place to ourselves. Let's dance. We got the whole place to ourselves.
Oh, I'm stuck. Oh, I'm so full from that omelet.
Hostage to mass together. Each other's civilian. It's a kind of civilian pop destruction. Populations hostile. Blue. It's a kind of populations hostile. The nucleus together. It's Pegasus 4. Destruction. Lunar base. Holding the nucleus. Mass destruction. Lunar base. Civilian pop. Lunar base 1. Mass destruction. Lunar base. Holding the kind of cosmic blue in which the two soon the nucleus together.
So I just wanted to give a brief patch overview slash kind of description of what I did here for the March Frequency Freaks performance submission. It's a day after I filmed the initial performance, so a couple differences in my case. I've taken out the Eventide Euro DDL to prepare that for sale, and so there's that difference. But with that, there were only 2 cables plugged into it, just in and out as an effects send. The main purpose of the patch was to make a polyphonic voice from KeyStep Pro using only a MIDI cable into Poly 2, and this sort of finished up my 2-week session on learning Poly 2 and trying to get the most out of it and just use it as an alternative to the 3.5 millimeter outs on these 4 voices here, as well as the drum gates. So if I want to just use a single cable coming out of KeyStep Pro and still get all that functionality and polyphony, I won't move the camera just because it might be awkward, but I have a saved profile in Poly 2 that has the MIDI mode set to next, so anytime it receives a gate or a note event, really, it will assign it to the next available voice, and it'll do that in sort of a round-robin fashion. I have 5 voices assigned to that profile, so instead of 4 or 8 or 6 even, with 5 you get an uneven distribution of the notes and note events across the 5 oscillators, so it ensures that there's a variety in the types of timbres you're hearing. In terms of the sound sources, we have channel 1 panned hard left, the Mother 32, and that has a few parameters going into it from Poly. It's got the pitch and gate, obviously, but the velocity as well as the velocity, which is, I believe, helping out with the Yeah, so there's velocity going into the mixer here, and so there's a mix of both velocity and the LFO rate, which are influencing the cutoff value of the Mother 32's filter. And then with this mixer, I make sure that it's mostly the velocity values that are affecting the filter. But I can't remember. During the performance, I may have moved that VC mix knob to give it more LFO influence. I may have started here, but anyway. So that's basically Mother 32. Oh, and the keyboard tracking is affecting the VC mix control as well, so it's moving this knob a bit around for me as the notes that are received into it change in terms of their registers, their pitches. This MIDI in isn't doing anything, it's just there. So the second oscillator I have is the graphic VCO. I'm using it in wavetable mode. I was using the organ sound, and I had the morph CV for the from the velocity for that voice morphing around. So I'm not sure if you can see on that video, hopefully you can, but this waveform changes as I move the morph knob, as you would expect from a wavetable VCO. VCOs 3 and 4 are from Disting EX, and I know I have this Demon Core oscillator here, and I normally would use it, but I wanted to explore in this patch what it would be like to use all of my available distings. So with Disting EX, for those that don't know, it can either be used in dual mode, or it can either be used as a single module or as two higher powered Mark IVs, which I have to the side. So I'm using the EX as two Mark IVs plus an actual Mark IV in the B8 algorithm, the VCO with wave shaping. So basically you're getting two triangles out of here with some wave shaping, and I'm taking the, I think it's velocity, or it might be aftertouch, one of which is going straight into oscillator 3, and then that same aftertouch value is going into maths and then inverted, and the inverted aftertouch is affecting the wave shaping on the fourth oscillator, which is the right half of the EX. My last oscillator is the Mark IV here, and that one's interesting, kind of a wild card, because I'll get into the filters in a second, but this one has wave folding happening with this Granular Fold 6. So in terms of filters, the Mother 32, I'm using its own filter, because why not? The graphic VCO, I'm using the Cinnamon filter, which I love. And you know, if you pair it with, if you don't mind holes in your case, it's 5 HP. So if you don't mind a hole, then a 1 HP gap might be good. Get some heat dissipation happening. Or you can get a 3 HP or another odd HP numbered module like a Pico series from Erica Synths. I'm using that Pico series for the Pico mix for the two outputs on the graphic VCO. Just so we have both of them represented. And so the Disting EX, the two oscillators there, are each getting a carbon filter. Love the carbon filter. It can be really clean, but also really disgusting, and all of these filters, as well as the UVCF, which is taking care of the fifth oscillator, UVCF in tandem with the wave folder, all of those cutoff values are being affected by velocity. So I've got pitch, gate, and velocity for all 5 voices, and then I think I have a couple duplicate aftertouch or velocity things on these bottom outs. For enveloping, there is the Quadrax here, and that's basically just going to the VCA, the amplification envelopes. So none of the amplifiers are open by default. I keep them closed so that it's only the envelope that influences what you're hearing. But as you hear in the recording, I start with short values and then lengthen them and then change them as we go. The KeyStep Pro is kind of interesting here because I have 3 scenes, each of which have a set of chained patterns together. So unfortunately, in the current firmware, you can't chain scenes together. So I had to improvise a little bit at one point in the recording. After I passed the first scene, basically I had to remember how the patterns progressed from there. But I think it turned out quite well. I'm quite proud of this recording, which is why I'm spending all this time with the explanation. So before I get into KeyStep Pro, I'll just say with the color coordination, all of the black cables basically are to do with Mother 32, as you can see. Pretty much all the red cables, or all of the red cables have something to do with graphic VCO. All of the blue cables have to do with the EX oscillators, and I have some of these lighter blue cables. I only have 2 of them, but they are an attempt to indicate the first of the 2 EX oscillators. And then green obviously is for the last oscillator, so that helps me keep my brain organized and see, you know, if any given cable, what's its main purpose, or what is it serving, which sound source. And then all the yellow cables are for effects, so I've got 3 effect sends on the Bifaco expander here, and the effect sends in the recording were the Euro DDL, which is out of the case right now, the Erica Synths dual effects, which is being set to the stalker reverb mode on the left side, and the saturated reverb on the right. And so that's what some of what you're hearing. Anybody who listened in headphones, some of what you're hearing on the left is the stalker reverb's feedback, which I love, and the saturated reverb in the right side of your head is great because it has this tone control, which is basically a low-pass filter. Okay, so then for the KeyStep Pro, I can just sort of play the first scene and show you. So the first pattern number plays 4 times in this chain, and then pattern number 2 will come in here and play twice, and then pattern 3 will come in and play twice. And actually, if I do the follow function here, you can... Pattern 4 will play 3 times. Pattern 5 will play 3 times. And then what I would like Arteaga to do is allow scene chaining. So what I would like to do is go to scene 2 here, and it will play scene 6 4 times, and then 7 will be played twice, 8 will be played twice, 9 will be played 4 times, and 10 will be played 4 times. But while it's playing here, it just loops 6, so you can't really tell. But then scene 3, we'll start with, it's another chain of 16 patterns, so it'll go 11 4 times, and then it'll go back and forth 13, 14 twice, and then scene 15, or pattern 15, pardon, 8 times, and then that basically will end off the track with a more sort of optimistic version in a major key of the original pattern. brief overview there. I'll make some modular grid stuff too, mainly for me, just to see in detail if I ever want to recreate a polyphonic synth using the Poly 2. I can build this up again quickly. So, thanks for watching.